prepare for disasters. This program tonight is brought to you by Cedar Hills Ready and Quake Up. Our mission is to create caring, connected, and resilient neighborhoods. We're committed to making sure that every neighbor is prepared and has the best chance of survival in the event of a disaster. And everyone is welcome here. Cedar Hills Ready isn't just about my neighborhood, it's about yours as well. It's a movement to connect neighbors with each other because there is strength and fun in numbers. Here's our group of neighbors and community leaders who've created this program. As you can see, we have an experienced group of people. We are always looking for new input. If you're interested in joining our efforts, please contact us at info.cedarhillsready@gmail.com, and that's down at the bottom of the screen there. We're going to be going over a lot of information today in a short period of time, and you may want to take some notes, but don't worry about writing everything down because you'll have access to the slides and the lists in this presentation and all kinds of additional free resources. We make our Get Prepared Now booklet available to you on our website. Thank you to Barbara Bracken and the Tualatin Neighborhood Ready group for the original material in this booklet. It contains all kinds of information, including inserts and tools that can help you in your planning. Topics cover family emergency plans, how to become earthquake safe, calendar for planning your disaster supplies, and a lot more. And the 9 steps that we cover tonight in this meeting is covered on page 12 of the booklet. So check out the link on the slide for more information. This is the agenda for today. For the last few months, we've been talking about personal preparedness, including preparing emergency supplies and go bags, cooking in a disaster, water and sanitation, and identifying home hazards. These are critical areas of personal and family preparation for potential disasters. Tonight, we're going to shift our attention to a broader resource for survival after an earthquake or a natural disaster that hits us where we live. Tonight, we're going to relate all of this personal preparation to the neighborhood that you live in. And we're going to talk about how to enroll your neighbors in planning for resiliency and survival, helping each other by leveraging our combined strengths and resources. This program may go a little bit longer than usual in our attempt to make this more interactive with breakout sessions and Q&A. So I'd like to turn this over to Kate Arnold to introduce tonight's program. Kate?
Thank you, Karen. So why are we here tonight? What's this about working with neighbors? We've seen our own disasters this past year, the pandemic, electric power outages, evacuations, and property damage during the ice storm and wildfires. But let me start with a story from the past. In 1991, a wildfire hit the Oakland Hills in East San Francisco. Very quickly, 2,800 homes were destroyed, 25 people were killed, and this was 29 years before the Paradise Fire, which destroyed an entire town and cost even more lives. And it was long before our own Detroit fire wiped off, where the city was wiped off the map by a wildfire in 2020. In 1991, a man named Peter Scott lost his elderly mother, Frances, in that fire. After the fire was quenched, Mr. Scott returned to his mother's burned house and neighborhood to settle her affairs. Neighbors were meeting together after the fire to clean up and deal with common issues like insurance and property matters. Mr. Scott participated with these neighborhood meetings and learned in one of them that Frances had perished because no one knew her. She was a private person and lived a quiet life. Most of the neighbors weren't even aware that she was part of their community, and this was heartbreaking. He later said, "If the community had had a meeting like this to get to know one another before the fire, my mother would be here with us today." When she heard this story, Dr. Luann Johnson, who was part of the Washington State Emergency Department, saw how this applied to other communities, including her own, and was moved to create a program to address what was missing in Frances's community. Dr. Johnson called it Map Your Neighborhood. It was a simple but powerful planning tool, which has since been adopted around the country in a variety of forms and is now sponsored as by FEMA as a key part of disaster survival planning. It's about you and your neighbors. This is what we want to talk about tonight, how to be neighborhood ready. Next slide. This is how we visualize our responsibilities and expectations in a major disaster. Normally, you would see this facing in the opposite way as a pyramid with the feds at the top and levels of authority going down. But we like to show it this way to illustrate that while major support will be provided by our institutional partners, they are going to take a while to be able to come and help us. When emergency response agencies like police, fire, and FEMA are initially overwhelmed, important immediate survival actions need to take place, and those depend on us and our neighbors. We are the first responders to take care of each other. If the disaster is the big one, the Cascadia subduction zone earthquake, it's going to be a different world. Emergency responders will be overwhelmed. We will have to be able to stay in place, likely without power, without running water or access to stores or gas stations and other basic services. This slide is from a joint study done by FEMA and our state and local responder agencies in 2015, which will be updated later this year. It gives us a good picture of how long it takes for government agencies and utility companies to recover our community infrastructure after the Cascadia earthquake. Electricity is likely to be out of service in our area for up to 3 months. Water and sewer services are likely to be unavailable for months, perhaps as much as a year, as will roads and streets, especially bridges, are likely to be unusable for months, again, as much as a year. Most important, police and fire stations are expected to be out of reach for some areas for months, and healthcare facilities unavailable for over a year. Our neighborhood will need to work at the community level on their own to make life tolerable and safe for all. To be able to be prepared to work together to take care of ourselves, we need to get to know each other and start planning together as neighborhoods so that we will be ready to deal with the aftermath, not only for the earthquake, but for fires, storms, and other disasters. We have a simple and fun way to do this, the Neighborhood Ready program. What specifically does the Neighborhood Ready program do for you and your neighbors? Remember that story about Peter Scott and his mother? This is a simple, straightforward way to get to know your neighbors so that we aren't alone and invisible. With a minimal amount of time and energy, you and your neighbors can learn this tried and true 9-step survival strategy and plan to follow it when the catastrophe hits. So what are our goals for tonight? First, we'll break into smaller groups to get acquainted. Then we'll come back as a larger audience and determine what the 9-step recovery strategy is and how to get started with your neighbors. We'll share resources you can get for your first Neighborhood Ready meeting, what information and materials are available, and how to schedule a facilitator to go through it at your meeting. Then we will go back into our groups to talk about next steps, including identifying hosts for your future Neighborhood Ready meetings. This should be fun. Okay, now we're going to go into smaller work groups. When this breakout is triggered, here's what we'd like each group to do. The breakout session is only 6 minutes, and so afterwards you'll automatically be returned to the larger groups. Speak briefly, introduce yourself, 1 minute apiece. You can share what neighborhood you live in, how long you've lived there, how many neighbors you know. Also, please share and write down disaster tips, something you've done or have heard to do to prepare for a disaster. All right, let's get started. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you all learned something new. If you shared a disaster preparedness tip or learned a new one, can you please take a minute now to go into the chat room and write down what you heard or shared? Great. And then Stan, if you want to share some of the tips that people are writing, that would be cool.
Camping gear was the primary one that someone came up with that in the urban camping mentality. Go bag was another one. Water, lots of water. And then having your vehicle, a truck full of stuff that would apply in emergency situation. So,
oh, those are all good ideas. Now to hear more about what to do, we're going to have Bill Hall come up and he will explain what the 9-step program is. Bill, are you ready to take it away?
Welcome, everybody. Thank you, Kate. Yes, I'm going to quickly go over the 9-step recovery strategy that FEMA is recommending and cover generally what this strategy includes. Now, when you invite your neighbors in for a neighborhood meeting, our facilitator will provide a lot more detail. Now, I expect that you're going to have some questions tonight, and we will have a Q&A session at the end of tonight's program and try to answer those. So please feel free to post your questions in the meantime on the chat feature, and one of our leaders will gather them for discussion at the end. Why an explicit strategy with steps? Remember that when a disaster like an earthquake hits, it triggers a lot of adrenaline, panic, fear, confusion. This strategy that we're talking about helps you to know what to do first, what to do second, what are the priorities, so you don't have to stop and think about that, wasting precious time to help your family and your friends. So what's the purpose? What are the priorities of these 9 steps and their order of importance? The Neighborhood Ready 9-step plan follows these priorities immediately after a sudden disaster like an earthquake. It's a really simple but very powerful mission. First of all, you can't help anybody if you weren't safe yourself. So first, protect yourself until the shaking is over, and then make sure that the family is okay altogether. Second, there are going to be challenges, new challenges after an earthquake. You will definitely have broken glass all over the floor. Doors might be warped. Parts of the walls might have collapsed. So after you see to the immediate needs of your family, make sure that your home environment is safe. And there are some steps to take care of this. And then the third priority, once you've stabilized your situation, you start working together as neighbors to determine hazards and needs in your immediate living area, some of which you can't deal with yourself, and some of which can be resolved with cooperative actions as a group. So let's start going through this by visualizing the Cascadia earthquake as we are likely to feel it here in the Willamette Valley. So everybody close your eyes and imagine suddenly there begins an at least 3 to 5 minute period of strong, violent shaking in your home, listening to glass breaking, things falling, the floor rolling and shaking so that you can't even staying up, or you get thrown out of your bed. A strong tendency to panic. Maybe you're just frozen in place after the shaking stops. Stuff is all over the floor. Oh, suddenly your daughter is calling for help. What do I do first? Well, we're going to cover this in detail in your first meeting with you and your neighbors. But let's go through the basics of the 9 steps now. Obviously, the first thing when an earthquake hits is drop, cover, and hold on. Don't let yourself get thrown around by the shaking. Protect yourself from flying objects until it's over. When the shaking stops, now it's time for action. And this is a simple, focused, intentional protocol that you can follow to begin the recovery process. So, step number 1, check your own condition and make yourself safe so that you can help others. Your priority, if you are functional, is to protect your head, your hands, and your feet from broken glass as you move around the house. Imagine running to help a family member and slicing open your foot on broken glass on the way. Pain, bleeding, how much can you help anybody then? Now, we talked about an under the bed kit in our March meeting with head, hand, and foot protective gear in it. And that's a picture of it on the left here. We're going to demonstrate a kit like this to your neighbors and you in your first neighborhood meeting. And you can also find a list of what's in this kit in our Get Prepared Now booklet mentioned by Karen earlier. Okay, then see to the care of your loved ones. Check everybody for injuries. First aid may be required, but make sure the rest of your family also has protection for head, hands, and feet. Reassure everybody that there's a plan. There's no cause for panic. Make sure, in fact, ahead of time that you've prepared a family plan for care, communication, and calm. Okay, now you and your family are checked over and you're okay, or at least stabilized. And so it's time to shift your attention to make your home environment truly safe so that you can begin the process of recovering safely. So step number 2 is listen for hissing or a smell of rotten egg odor, and go check your gas meter to see if it's spinning fast. If any of these symptoms are true, shut off the gas immediately. The same is true if you're using propane. Now, we will show you and your neighbors how to do this in the first meeting of neighbors. So a question for everybody, all of us here tonight. How many of you know where your gas meter, where it's located, and how to get to it easily, and how to turn it off? We know that 67%, 2/3 of earthquake damage is not caused by shaking, but in fact by fire. And the overwhelming majority of these fires are caused by gas leak. So this is a critical step. All right, step number 3, shut off your water at the house. Another question, how many of you know where your water main is, the shut off in your house, not the one on the street? And we'll show you how to identify and understand how to shut this off and label it clearly in your first Neighborhood Ready meeting. Why would you do this? Why shut the water off? Well, if you remember that chart that Kate showed you earlier, you're going to need a supply of water during the recovery period before services are restored. There's potable water, drinkable water in your pipes and in your hot water heater. But remember that much of our area was constructed with water and sewer lines buried in the same underground tunnels. And our experts tell us that there could be breaks in both lines, and this could cause a cross-contamination and make the water that's in your house undrinkable. So shut that water off as a precaution until the authorities give the go-ahead to turn it back on. Okay, step number 4, what about electricity? Well, check to see if you should shut that off. You may have sparking that you can tell, which would be a fire danger. If you have a gas leak, you should shut it off. And if you decide to do this, you need to shut it off one breaker at a time and then shut off the main power last. And we can talk about that in detail at the neighborhood meeting. So these are the critical steps for making your home environment safe for you and your family. Okay, now we're going to shift to our neighborhood environment. Step number 5, the first thing that you want to do is to announce your status to the neighborhood by posting that OK or help sign that we showed in the under the bed kit on the front door, or maybe on a window. We had a picture of that, and we're going to provide that in our first neighborhood meeting. Putting this kind of a sign up tells your neighbors which houses need help first. Step number 6 is put one of your fire extinguishers on the curb where the neighbors can see it. Why would you do this? Well, it might help a neighbor who can't find theirs. In my neighborhood, for example, a fire in one house near all of the tall trees in almost every yard here is likely to spread to everybody else's house. So let's look out for each other in order to protect ourselves as well. Fire can be the enemy of all. Another question for you. How many of you have a fire extinguisher in your kitchen and in your garage? Do you know how long one of these lasts when you use it? Pause, pause. Well, it lasts only 13 seconds. So be prepared. Buy another one. Another question. How many of you have shaken your fire extinguisher in the last 6 months? Did you know that if you haven't done that, the powder that's in it that extinguishes the fires might in fact be caked up in the barrel and useless for suppressing a fire? This kind of information we will also go over and demonstrate with you, your neighbors at the first meeting. Okay, step number 7. Once the first 6 steps are taken, somebody from your household can go to the neighborhood gathering site. And this is a place, one of the homes, which is chosen by you at your first meeting, a place where you can meet as neighbors to share information, coordinate action, and take care of neighborhood needs. All right, step number 8. When you and your neighbors have each stabilized your home situation, you come together and form teams to do some really important work. One team, for example, can listen to emergency alert systems on the AM/FM radio or to the NOAA weather radio, and keep your neighborhood, your neighbors informed of what they learn on family radio systems or on walkie-talkies. Another team could be formed to check on your neighbors that your neighborhood has identified as those who are elderly, those who are maybe disabled, or homes where children may be alone when a quake hits. Check those out. Pick a third team that will check all of those natural gas meters and propane tanks among your all of the neighbors in your group and shut the gas off as necessary. Remember the test? Sniff, listen, and look at the spinning meter. Fire must be prevented. A fourth team can check on all of the homes with the help card that I mentioned, displayed on the front door or the window, or with homes that don't have any card showing. Some first aid may be required if neighbors need help. So each team should be given a time limit for checking back in, and everybody will always go out in at least pairs, buddy system, to make sure that everybody stays safe. This is a reconnaissance mission. All right, step number 9. After the teams have done their checking and returned to the gathering site, everybody reports sharing what they've found and what they've done for neighbors in need. And then as a neighborhood, make a plan for the neighborhood actions to take place then. Are there children, elderly or disabled, that need help? Who's going to do that? Do we need to designate someone's home as a central care facility? Do we need to plan to stay in touch? And if so, how are we going to do that? Should we report our status to the nearest CERT assembly area? Making a record of the neighborhood status is a good idea for reporting to CERT or to other recovery agencies when they come by. Our facilitator will be able to talk about how to record all this information and the status of your neighborhood with you and your neighbors at the first meeting. We have map formats, we have plans that you can follow for keeping important information. All of this is covered at your first meeting. Okay, 9 simple steps, but important ones to stabilize your situation, take care of immediate needs, and decide what needs to be done for a prolonged recovery period. A neighborhood plan. Of course, plans always need adjustment later as events unfold. Be flexible, and check what's happening in the outside world that might be affecting you. Okay, so just a quick review. The priorities when a disaster is hitting are clear. First, focus is on the condition and safety of yourself and your family. Second, your living environment has been affected, perhaps radically, and you need to make sure that it's safe for everybody in the family. Take those steps next. Then you can check on your immediate neighbors in a step-by-step plan to leverage your skills and resources as a group to help each other plan next steps and continue to work together. And when you organize your first meeting with your chosen neighbors, our facilitator will guide you and your neighbors through the development of your neighborhood plan for recovery. A lot of information very quickly. Take a deep breath. I know you probably have questions, and we can take some time in the Q&A period at the end of the presentation to answer some of the details about these 9 steps, which I went through very quickly in summary form. It's really a straightforward protocol, but it requires getting started. So at this point in our discussion, I would like to turn the meeting over to our Neighborhood Ready coordinator, Lincoln Thomas. And he's going to explain how we can get the program started in your neighborhood, how to set up the first meeting, and what happens next. Take it, Lincoln.
Thank you, Bill. The 9-step program that Bill summarized for us is something that we'll present in greater detail at your first meeting. Resources for neighborhood hosts are posted on our webpage for this meeting. So you may be asking, how does one set this up? How can I get the folks at Cedar Hills Ready to come and present this material and get my neighborhood going? How do I get started with the first meeting? Well, the first step is to self-select neighborhood hosts. Hopefully loads of you will do that tonight, and that you will decide to help organize your block. If you've already decided to do this, you can let me know by email or chat right now. My email is right there on the screen, lincoln.cedarhillsready@gmail.com, or send me a private chat right now and we'll get you going. After that, when you contact us, we will connect you with a facilitator to present the 9-step program and offer neighborhood guidance. We can provide materials and you can use us as sounding boards for setting up your meeting. It may be worth repeating that we do all of this for free because we are committed to our neighbors' safety. Next, the first job of a neighborhood host is to decide on a group of your closest neighbors to invite to a meeting. Some people do a six-pack, consisting of neighbors on either side of you and the 3 across the street. A group of homes in a cul-de-sac also makes for a natural group. Karen and Bill picked 10 houses on either side of theirs and defined it as a neighborhood group. Start with what you can realistically do. Next, pick a date for the first meeting and make sure the date works with a facilitator. Then send invitations to your neighbors. This may be the most fun part of the process, actually connecting with neighbors and planning the event. You can create your own invitations and run your own Zoom meeting, or we can help you with either of these components. Next slide, please. We have all had to adjust to the COVID pandemic environment, and that is why we are meeting virtually today. Over the last year, Cedar Hills Ready has amassed some experience doing neighborhood ready meetings by Zoom, and we can help you prepare for that. At your first meeting, you will get acquainted with neighbors under a specific context, that we are here to start getting ready together for disaster preparedness. You will introduce one of us, a facilitator for the discussion, and your group will watch the neighborhood readiness program, including the 9-step recovery process. This discussion, the discussion that follows, is an engaging process that is critical to everyone's recovery in the event of a disaster. Lots of questions come up, and we try to have answers. Most importantly, this is an interactive common purpose planning process among neighborhoods. During the process, you and your neighbors will use a neighborhood map to fashion a plan based on the 9-step protocol. Again, we have samples of plans and can help guide the discussion so you come away with what you need. Making a neighborhood map can be low-tech or high-tech. It can be hand-drawn or drawn with software. Some useful sources for starting maps are portlandmaps.com, Google Maps, or the Homeowners Association of Cedar Hills, or HASH. For the purposes of this initial meeting, screen sharing an existing map from one of these sources will be sufficient, and your facilitator can take care of this step if you like. Your neighbor group will want to update the map later with some of the following information. For example, here's one Cedar Hills Ready map. They have marked gas shutoffs appropriately where they are with relative to the house. And they've listed the number of children and elderly in each home. Pets could also be included, and an accompanying spreadsheet could contain additional contact information. Note that the neighborhood gathering site from step 7 is labeled as home 10. The block shown here is about the maximum size for one neighborhood group, about 19 or 20 households. Since these houses are on only one side of the street, the distance to cover after a disaster is increased, making it more difficult. But it is probably the reasonable arrangement of homes for this area. A 6-pack approach would typically include next door neighbors on either side of the middle house and the facing 3 home houses across the street, though such an approach might not make sense for all streets, like the lower one in this map. And you can see the 6-pack there that popped up. That's what one might look like. But really, you can start your plan with any number of homes that you want and expand later as you are able. Once you have your preliminary map, you'll want to assemble a neighborhood resource plan. This plan consists of 3 inventories. 1, a special skill listing of special skills in your group. 2, of relevant equipment that people in the group might be willing to share. And 3, the special needs in the group of households. For instance, some folks might have mobility restrictions and need additional help in a disaster. Remember Francis Scott's story from earlier in the meeting? A completed neighborhood plan will also include a site for neighbors to gather and perhaps a separate care center in case of injuries. These on this slide are samples of skills and equipment that could be useful in a disaster. You and your neighbors may need to know who has first aid training, who has childcare skills, who has carpentry skills, etc. Similarly, you may need to know who has first aid supplies, spare tents or bedding or chainsaw, two-way radios. You could enter this information into a spreadsheet for planning and for emergency use. This is a sample form from the Cedar Hills Ready Get Ready Now booklets, which is, as we mentioned, free to download on our website. This form is for neighbors to fill out and return to neighborhood hosts, who can then enter it all into one spreadsheet so that every neighbor has a record of names, ages, special needs, pets, email addresses, etc. This kind of information, or this organization, facilitates recovery actions for each family, and it saves lives. This level of information may not be what you want shared with anyone outside of the neighborhood, so that's one thing that you need to discuss at the first meeting. What kinds of information will your group record, and where should it be kept? So those are some of the elements of your first neighborhood plan that we can help you and your neighbors put together. By the end of the meeting, you and your neighbors will have gotten acquainted, listened to the Neighborhood Ready presentation, and created a plan of action. You can follow up with a later meeting to finalize and share copies. This might be a group that you want to meet with twice a year to get reacquainted and update and practice your plan. So in a minute, we are going to go back into our smaller groups from tonight and talk about finding hosts for your first Neighborhood Ready meeting. But before that, we thought you might like to hear from some hosts who've already done this on their block. They will give you a brief story about how their first meeting went. Karen, would you like to talk about your experience on your block?
I can certainly do that. So my experience was awesome. Actually, we ended up creating this whole program as a result of it, Cedar Hills Ready. So we really loved it. What I did, and Bill was helping with this, is that I went from door to door with an invitation, and I talked to each neighbor, and we had, like Lincoln has said, we had like 20 different homes that we were addressing, and 19 of them said, right on, yeah, I'm interested. And so we had a great meeting. Judy Janowitz came, and she's my mentor. And I guess the tip or the trick that I would recommend in terms of doing this is, number one is to make it fun. we had food there, and that was fun. 2 is to follow up and to invite people face to face. I think now that the pandemic is sort of, it's becoming safer as we get vaccinated, we can go more face to face and talk to our neighbors. And the thing that I really wanted to say was the most fun, honestly, is I have made a lot of new friends. I did not know that there was another Karen on my block, and I've lived on this block for 25 years, and there's another Karen who's lived here longer than me. She was a little bit further down, and now when I walk through the street, I know people, and it's great. It's a good way to get to know your neighbors, for sure.
Well, thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
All right.
Kate could probably share. She just did this.
Yeah, I just did this a little over a week ago. It was really fun. I did my block, my side of the street, and the opposite side of the street. I made sure that the 6-pack around my house, I picked a date and a time that they could all make it, because I wanted to make sure that my immediate neighbors would be able to do it. And then I sent it out. But I had 16 houses, and I can't remember, I think it was 13 or 14 showed up. And it was really great to meet the neighbors, start plotting things. I also decided to hand out paper copies of stuff. Some people are concerned about sharing personal information via email, so I thought it would be good to just give people a physical copy of stuff where they can keep things. So we're in the process now of gathering up the information from everybody, and then we'll have a check-in with where we are in about another month. And then I'm hoping maybe by September we could meet in the neighborhood. It'll be safe enough, and we can see the kids. We can see who all the kids are. The kids can all see who we are, and that'll be a valuable thing to do.
Great. Yeah, things are definitely different in a COVID environment. So it'd be great for you to be seeing each other in person. All right. Well, thank you, Kate, and thank you, Karen. Okay. Well, it's almost time to return to our breakout groups for 10 minutes of discussion. We want all of you to be hosts on your block. If you've already decided to aim for a 6-pack or more homes on your block, go ahead and let me know. Let us know via private chat right now, or you can email me again. If leading a 6-pack is not possible for you, then we would ask that you describe a personally realistic goal regarding the people with whom you will share this information in the next month. So that's something to do in this meeting. We're in the breakout room we're about to do. Could you share the meeting's information from tonight with one neighbor and agree to check on each other in the event of a disaster? Could you recruit a neighbor on your block to help organize the rest of the block or more of the block? Could you mobilize a buddy in another block or another state to organize their block with you? These are just some suggested goals, and you're welcome to make your own as you see fit. So once everyone has described their goals in our breakout session, consider whether your breakout group would be interested in checking in again as a group in a month's time. I'm only suggesting this because sometimes folks appreciate having additional accountability for certain goals. If the group isn't interested, that's fine too. So to summarize, in this breakout group right now, please discuss who you will include in this preparation in the next month, and also decide whether your breakout group from tonight will reconvene in the next month. Karen is ready to send you into your breakout rooms now to discuss the realistic goals about becoming neighborhood hosts. We'll see you in 10 minutes. I'm back. Welcome back, everybody. 10 minutes, or I guess 7 minutes isn't a lot of time, but we hope you got some ideas about getting started on setting up a neighborhood group. So now it's time for action.
Thank you, Lincoln. Thank you, all of the speakers. Before we go into the Q&A session, I'd like to tell you a bit about what's happening in our next meeting, June 23rd. And we're going to be talking, as I mentioned before, about barrel survival, community caches, and rain barrel storage. So this is, it's about being resilient and help everyone on your street have the most important elements after disaster which is water, sanitation, and hygiene kits. Learn what 230 homes in one Beaverton neighborhood did to prepare, and catch the essential tips for collecting and caring for rooftop rainwater. Way to go green and be water ready. So join us on June 23rd. And you can see that there is a URL right there. And we'll send that URL when we do our follow-up. Again, a quick reminder that you can get your free copy of that Get Prepared Now booklet on the website. And here are the links. And so let's go to our Q&A. Stan?
So in the beginning, Tish asked a question. Friends in Multnomah County tell me they have a nearby gathering location in the event of a disaster. How does a Washington County resident find out if where such a location is near to my particular neighborhood? And this is why we're doing this program, is Washington County does not have the beacon system like Portland does. And this is why we've put this program together to utilize the Map Your Neighborhood program, Neighbors Helping Neighbors. And another question from her is, how are you coordinating and working with Portland's net teams in each neighborhood? Well, Portland is in Portland, and CERTS and Map Your Neighborhood is in Washington County. So there's not really a coordination per se, though I live in Garden Home and I've been in contact with Portland's nearby net teams, but we don't have really a orchestrated coordination between the two of us. Though I'm certain we would help each other when the need rises. Tish also asks, very active, why is it recommended to shut off one breaker at a time instead of just the main? Bill, do you want to answer that, please?
Yeah, it's hard on the system if you turn off the main first. It's recommended by the utility that you shut off each breaker first, and then shut off the main, and then when it comes time to turn your electricity back on, you do that in reverse. You turn on the main and then turn on each breaker as you need it.
Okay, and then the multi-story complex is an interesting issue, and the people that actually put Map Your Neighborhood together in Seattle, they have some documents that will be added to our website in regards to that. How they treat the Map Your Neighborhood or the Neighbors Helping Neighbors is each floor acts as a neighborhood. So if there's 6 apartments or a dozen apartments, then they would all coordinate and work together, and then each floor would work likewise. And that's how that would be handled. I hope that answers your questions. And that's what I have so far. Let me recheck the chat.
Let me add something from our group, Stan. We had a similar concern. How do you decide how to size your group? And I think it's important to emphasize that the purpose of the Neighborhood Ready program is to present a 9-step strategy for a workably sized group. And ideally, we'd like to have all of Washington County organized into these workable groups. The important point is to get started. You can start with a small group. You can start with a group of the size that we did, which is 20. But the important point is that you're not, when a disaster hits, you're not going to solve all of Cedar Hills' problems. You need to coordinate with your neighbors to make sure that your immediate environment is safe.
And one more question came in from Brenda S. An earlier question. Some very private neighbors are very reluctant to share personal information. Suggestions for encouraging that this is a good reason to share.
Mm. Yeah, you know, that's a good question. Brenda, was it Brenda that asked that question?
Yes.
Yeah, that's a really good thing to note. We have a set of neighbors who are very private, and what they did was they shared their information with the host, that would be us, and didn't share it with everybody else, which was okay. I think you just have to kind of go with what people are, willing to do. And when out of those 20 houses, and we got 19 who said yes, the 20th, I said, well, if we have a really major, earthquake, do you mind if we come and check on you to see if you're okay? He said yes. So, it's just whatever people are willing to do, I think is going to work out. Most people are interested in participating.
If I could add to that also, it often takes several meetings or even more before people become comfortable, because what you're doing is you're building trust, and trust nowadays can sometimes be hard to come by. And so it's time. And sometimes it's not you, it's somebody else that they do trust. And eventually, most of the time, most people will come around because they're seeing everybody else doing it and that type of thing.
And to add to that, Stan, I think that the message that one of the key messages that we're trying to give tonight is that process has to start somewhere. And it doesn't all happen at once, but there's a lot of detailed, helpful information about being prepared that can be provided to people at minimum. And then once you've provided that, or provided the opportunity to have a facilitator come in and provide that information, then people begin to talk to each other about common issues, and over the long period, they begin to work together on that issue, even if they're not friends that you hang out with.
Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Right. I think with more disasters happening, it's really clear that your survival may depend upon your neighbors. So it's a really good idea to do this. Well, has anybody on the call have you done a Map Your Neighborhood and have a tip to share?
It's a bunch of newbies.
There's a new message, looks like.
Oh, thank you, Cindy.
Thank you, Cindy.
I usually plan that it's going to take multiple meetings to get the majority of people up to speed. I don't, it's just my recognition that not everyone can move at the same speed or same pace. So,
Is there?
I had a quick question, Karen. Hi, Deb.
Hi.
The idea, this is all focused, especially the name, around quakes, right? And other people are only concerned about the fires, because that seems to be a more hot ticket item, so to speak. And the quakes seem to be a little bit more like kind of esoteric, not quite as something as, but the fires from last year. So is there a way we can couch things, in a fire perspective, like translate some of this information to that, like some ideas on what to do with your yard to keep it moist, whatever. I don't even know
It's a
what
good
they
thing
are.
that you're.
Now that you, now
Go
that you,
ahead.
now that you mentioned that, the July meeting of our group is
Right.
focused on that very thing.
Okay, and as it dovetails with getting your neighborhood together in that sense, or
We will make sure that it dovetails. It's a good point. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thanks.
But I might mention that if your neighbors are particularly interested in how the fire is going to affect their homes and how to make their homes safe, then it might be an in to get them
Yes.
discussing with you, because you can share our meetings with them, and if that's a concern of yours, come to our meeting in July.
Right. Good point. I like that.
I was going to add a tip, and that was 2 summers ago, someone wanted to have a Map Your Neighborhood in my community in Forest Grove as a block party. And so I was like, well, okay. And
Sure.
closed off the street, and she invited people as a potluck, and people brought out food, and we set up tables. And she was really disappointed. She invited like 20 different homes, and, at first only like 3 or 4 homes people showed up. But then as the hour went on, more and more people started coming out of their houses to see what was going on. And people just got to know each other. And I still talked about the Map Your Neighborhood program and that maybe we would follow up. Of course, then COVID hit. But I just thought, you know what? That would be perfect for COVID now. We can meet outside. People
You bet.
can do it in your driveway. So that would be kind of something that I would like to try again in my own neighborhood.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stacy, and nice to see you, by the way. So Patty had a question about recommendations about apartment complex again. Stan, I thought you had addressed that to some degree, but maybe Patty, do you want to unmute and ask your question?
Well, thank you. The apartment complex is just a couple doors down from us, is very, very large. And so I wasn't sure, I guess I must have missed hearing how to approach that.
Well,
I think, go ahead.
Well, what they recommend is that, and again, it depends on how big it is, because you don't want to get anything over like 20 households, because the whole magic of this program is you've got about 60 minutes, 1 hour to check on everybody to see if they are okay. And so you've had the earthquake, you're checking your own household, and then you're organizing, and then you're trying to go door to door. So you don't want it so large that you can't manage it in a timely fashion. So what the tendency is that each floor is a neighborhood. And so you would focus on those neighbors organizing and getting themselves prepared in the 9-step program to help each other. If it's, let's say it's got 40 residences on the floor, which I can't imagine that being that big, you would just split it in half or split it in thirds. And so that's the mechanism that Seattle's Map Your Neighborhood program has devised.
So Stan, what you're saying is, you said before that there is some materials on Map Your Neighborhood for apartments that you're going to put up on the website.
Yeah, it's a multi-story facility. It could be condos or apartment complexes.
Okay. And of course, working with the owners, like the complex by us is a home forward complex. So probably checking with the home forward people about coordinating that.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. The other trick with apartment complexes is that people tend to come and go more. It's not as stable as houses, but that's just a challenge. Probably just means, it doesn't mean that you shouldn't try to do it, but it just may require more active and frequent meetings or something. Any other questions or tips?
We have facilitators that are ready to come and help you.
So we hope you reach out to us and set up your neighbors, and we'll come in and speak to them. Well, if there are no more questions, I would say that we are. Oh, wait. I think, Angelica, you're speaking, but you're muted.
Okay. Yeah, I was going to put something. I was going to dictate to the chat, but so when you come, is it you come one time or do you come for a series of times? I'm not really clear.
We usually come for the first meeting, and then you have the materials and all of the information to continue it. We have these meetings, the Cedar Hills Ready meetings, monthly right now.
Right. Yeah.
So you can always invite people to come to our informational meetings on various topics. But this particular meeting, which is for your neighborhood in particular, we would show up once.
Okay. So, yeah, we've got 26 homes. It's a co-housing community, if you know what that is. So it's condos, and we're all on the board of directors. So I'm thinking that, especially since it's an, earthquake, we've got 12 houses on one side of a seasonal stream with a bridge and 14 on the other. So maybe to split it up in two and get a leadership on either side, and then come together like for a presentation, like from one of you that would help us, and then maybe get people to work in smaller groups, because I think that would be easier for people to get together too. I mean, we all know each other, but some people are more private than others.
Yeah, we're more than happy to do that. Or even as since you've got such a large group, we could do 2 separate meetings if you wanted to do it that way.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Any other questions? All right. Well, you guys have been great, and thank you for coming and caring about your community. And we hope to be hearing from you. Talk to you all. See you next month, hopefully.
Thank you very much for everything that you've done to just keep this going and do this through the pandemic. It's just pretty amazing.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Good night.
Great seeing everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Take care. Have a good night.
Bye.